This is completely unacceptable. We need to address this now. You're not listening to me, Richard. This has been a problem for weeks now. You watched me inject those hormones for years. You watched me cry after every single failed pregnancy test. You let me believe my body was broken, that something was wrong with me. And the whole time, you knew. You knew you could father children. You knew, and you said nothing. Elena, please, just let me explain. Explain what, Richard? Explain why there's a 17-year-old girl in Hartford with your mother's eyes? Explain why you've been sending $8,000 a month to a woman named Diana for almost 2 decades? Explain why I had to hire a private investigator to learn that my husband has an entire family I knew nothing about? I was going to tell you. When, Richard, when were you going to tell me? After 23 years of marriage? After I spent a fortune on fertility treatments while you already had a healthy daughter? After I apologized to you over and over for failing to give you children? I was afraid of losing you. So instead, you made sure I would lose myself. You took away my ability to choose. You let me build my entire life on a foundation of lies. And now you want me to believe you were going to tell me? Elena, I love you. I have always loved you. You don't even know what that word means. Love doesn't hide. Love doesn't deceive. Love doesn't watch the person it claims to cherish suffer while holding the truth that could set them free. That's not love, Richard. That's cowardice dressed up in expensive suits and romantic gestures. What are you going to do? Something you never expected. Something that's going to shock everyone, including you. Now pay attention, because what Elena Bradford does next will challenge everything you think you know about betrayal, revenge, and the extraordinary power of a woman who refuses to let the worst thing that ever happened to her define who she becomes. But first, you need to understand how she got here, how a receipt in a suit pocket unraveled 23 years of carefully constructed lies, and why the other woman in this story isn't who you think she is. Please subscribe and like this video and listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. It started on a Tuesday morning, the kind of ordinary morning that changes everything without warning. Elena Bradford had been married to Richard Bradford for 23 years, 4 months, and 17 days. She knew this not because she counted, but because their anniversary fell 2 weeks before Christmas, and every year the holiday preparations reminded her of the celebration that came first. She was taking his suit jacket to the dry cleaner, charcoal gray Italian wool, the kind of suit that costs more than most people make in a month. Richard had spilled coffee on the sleeve during a conference call, and she was handling it because that's what she did. That's what she had always done, the small gestures of a devoted wife, the invisible labor of maintaining a life that looked perfect from the outside. She checked the pockets before handing anything to the cleaners. 23 years of marriage had taught her that Richard forgot things in his pockets. Business cards from meetings he meant to follow up on, receipts he needed for expense reports, the occasional scribbled note that made no sense to anyone but him. This time there was a receipt. Tiffany and Company, $14,000, a necklace purchased 3 weeks ago. Her birthday wasn't for 4 months. Their anniversary had passed in September. Christmas was still weeks away. She almost set it aside, almost chalked it up to some client gift, some business gesture she would learn about later. But something made her look closer. Something made her read the fine print at the bottom of the receipt where the engraving instructions were noted. For my Diana, always. She read it again, and 17 more times, standing there in their bedroom with the morning light streaming through windows that overlooked Central Park, holding a piece of paper that weighed almost nothing and somehow contained the weight of her entire world collapsing. Diana, not Elena, not Ellie, the nickname he'd given her on their 3rd date because he said her full name was too formal for someone who laughed the way she did. Not her. Diana. Here's what you need to understand about this moment. Most people, when they discover something like this, fall apart immediately. They scream, they cry, they call their best friend or their mother or their therapist and spiral into the kind of chaos that makes for dramatic television, but rarely leads to clarity. Elena Bradford did none of those things. She folded the receipt carefully along its original creases. She placed it in her purse. She picked up the suit jacket and walked downstairs to her car. She drove to the dry cleaner, dropped off the jacket, smiled at the woman behind the counter, and drove home. Then she sat on the edge of her bed, the California king with the imported Italian linens, in the penthouse that overlooked a city full of people living their normal lives with their normal problems, and she began to plan. Because Elena had learned something long before she ever met Richard Bradford. She had learned that falling apart was a luxury for people who had someone else to catch the pieces, and she had never been that kind of person. She grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment above a dry cleaner in Newark. Her mother worked 3 jobs. Her father left when she was 4, came back when she was 8, left again at 12, and the third time her mother changed the locks and never opened them again. That apartment above the dry cleaner smelled of chemicals and desperation, and the particular exhaustion of a woman doing everything alone. Elena used to fall asleep to the sound of her mother crying in the next room, trying to be quiet, never quite succeeding. She learned early that men were unreliable, that stability was earned, not given, that the only person you could truly count on was the one staring back at you in the mirror every morning. So when she met Richard Bradford at a charity gala, she wasn't swept off her feet. She was working that gala, actually, a caterer's assistant, serving champagne to people who had more money than she could imagine, wearing a uniform that made her invisible to everyone in the room. Everyone except Richard. He noticed her, asked her name, asked questions that suggested he actually cared about the answers. She gave him nothing because she had learned that giving too much too soon was how you got hurt. He asked for her number, she declined. He showed up at the catering company the next week asking for her specifically. She declined again. He sent flowers. She sent them back. It took 6 months before she agreed to have dinner with him, another year before she agreed to marry him. She wasn't playing games. She was evaluating, assessing, watching to see if this man would reveal himself to be like every other man she had known, the kind who promised everything and delivered nothing. He never did. Or at least she thought he never did. For 23 years, Richard Bradford was steady, present. He worked 80-hour weeks, but he came home. He missed their son Daniel's first steps because of a board meeting, but he coached Little League when Daniel was 7. He built an empire from a garage startup into a Fortune 500 company, but he still kissed her forehead every morning and asked about her day every evening. She had allowed herself to believe he was the exception, the one man who kept his promises, the one man worth trusting. And now she was holding a receipt that said, "For my Diana, always." She didn't confront him that night. She didn't confront him the next night either, or the week after. Here's what she did instead. She watched. Richard came home from work at 7:30 that evening, same as always. He kissed her forehead, same as always. He asked about her day, same as always. "Everything okay, Ellie? You seem quiet." "Just tired. Long day." He accepted this without question. Why would he question it? She had been playing the role of devoted wife for more than 2 decades. She was very good at it. They ate dinner together, salmon, roasted vegetables, a glass of wine. He talked about the Kensington merger, the one he'd been working on for 18 months. She listened, nodded, asked the right questions at the right moments. The whole time she was studying him, looking for cracks, for guilt, for any sign that he knew she knew, that somewhere behind his eyes he was hiding a secret that could destroy everything they had built together. She found nothing. His face was open, relaxed, the face of a man with nothing to hide. He made love to her that night with what seemed like genuine affection, and she lay beside him afterward in the dark, listening to his breathing slow into sleep, wondering how someone could be so good at pretending. Or maybe he wasn't pretending. Maybe this was who he was, a man who could compartmentalize so completely that the life he lived with her and the life he lived with Diana existed in entirely separate universes, never touching, never overlapping, never causing him to lose a moment of sleep. That possibility was almost worse than the alternative. She gave herself 1 week to observe, to gather information through careful attention before she brought in outside help. During that week, she noticed things she had never noticed before, or maybe she had noticed them and explained them away, because that's what you do when you trust someone. You give them the benefit of the doubt. You assume the best instead of the worst. His phone was always face down on the table. Had it always been that way? He took calls in another room, closing the door softly behind him. Business calls, he said, sensitive negotiations. She had never questioned it. There was a new password on his laptop. She discovered this when she went to check the weather while her own phone was charging, and the screen asked for credentials she didn't know. Small things, things that meant nothing on their own, but together, viewed through the lens of that receipt, they painted a picture she couldn't ignore. By the end of that week, she had made a decision. She was done watching. She needed answers, real answers, the kind that came with documentation. She found Jerome Wallace through careful research, a private investigator who specialized in discretion. His website said nothing about cheating spouses or suspicious partners. It talked about corporate investigations, asset protection, background verification, respectable language for respectable clients. She called from a burner phone she purchased at a convenience store with cash, old habits from a childhood where you learned not to leave trails. Mr. Wallace, my name isn't important. What is important is that I need information, and I need it handled with absolute discretion. That's what I do, Mrs. Not Important. What kind of information are you looking for? She told him about the receipt, about the name Diana, about the necklace that cost $14,000 and wasn't for her. She expected him to sound bored. He'd probably heard 1,000 versions of this story, wives discovering their husbands weren't who they seemed to be, the same sad song with different lyrics. Instead, he asked careful questions. Where was the receipt from? When was the purchase made? Did she have any other evidence, any other names, any other leads? She gave him what she had. He took notes. She could hear scratching through the phone. I can find out who Diana is. It'll take time, probably 2 weeks, depending on how well she's been hidden. Find her. Find out everything. I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with before I decide what to do about it. Mrs. Not Important, can I give you a piece of advice? She waited. Sometimes people ask me to dig and then they wish I hadn't. The truth isn't always what we want it to be. Once you know something, you can't unknow it. Are you prepared for that? I've been preparing for that my entire life, Mr. Wallace. Just find her. Those 2 weeks were the longest of Elena's life. She continued playing the role of devoted wife with the precision of a Broadway actress in her 1,000th performance. She smiled at the right moments, she laughed at his jokes, she attended his business dinners wearing the jewelry he had given her, none of which was from Tiffany's now that she thought about it. Had he always bought Diana the expensive things? Had Elena been getting the second-tier gifts while another woman received the diamonds and platinum? Stop it, she told herself. You don't know anything yet. Don't build a case before you have the evidence. But her mind wouldn't stop building, wouldn't stop constructing scenarios, imagining explanations, preparing herself for truths she couldn't yet articulate. Daniel's engagement party happened during those 2 weeks. Her son, 28 years old, successful in his own right, was marrying a lovely woman named Sophia. The party was at a restaurant Richard had rented out entirely for the occasion. 300 guests, champagne that cost more per bottle than Elena's mother had earned in a week. She stood beside Richard as they toasted to love, to commitment, to building a life with someone you trusted completely. The irony wasn't lost on her. To Daniel and Sophia, Richard raised his glass, may you build something together that lasts forever. May you always choose each other, every day, even when it's difficult. May your love be the foundation that holds everything else up. Beautiful words. She wondered if he had said similar words to Diana. She wondered if he believed any of them, or if they were just sounds he made because the moment required something to be said. She smiled through the toast, she smiled through the dancing, she smiled through the photographs that would hang in Daniel's home for decades, permanent evidence of a family that looked perfect and was rotting from the inside. Richard noticed nothing, or if he noticed, he said nothing, which was almost the same thing. That night, after the party, he reached for her in bed. She let him hold her, let him believe everything was normal, while her mind catalogued every touch and wondered how many times he had touched Diana the same way. "You were quiet tonight," he said it into the darkness, his hand tracing circles on her shoulder. "Everything okay?" "Just emotional. Our baby's getting married." He chuckled. "He's not a baby anymore. He'll always be my baby." Richard kissed her hair. "I love you, Ellie. You know that, right?" She waited 3 seconds before responding. "I know." But she didn't say it back, and he didn't seem to notice that either. The call from Wallace came on a Thursday afternoon. She was at a charity board meeting, pretending to care about the agenda while her phone vibrated silently in her purse. She excused herself, found a quiet hallway, called him back. "I've found her." His voice was careful, measured, the voice of someone delivering news they knew would cause damage. "But, Mrs. Bradford, this isn't what you think." Her heart stuttered at the use of her real name. He had never used it before. "How do you know who I am?" "I'm a private investigator. I investigate. Your husband is one of the most photographed businessmen in New York. Your face has been beside his in 100 magazines." "Fair enough. What did you find?" "Not over the phone. You need to see this in person. Can you come to my office this evening?" "That bad?" "That complicated." She went. Wallace's office was exactly what she had imagined. Nondescript building in Midtown. 3rd floor, no elevator, the kind of stairs that made you work for your secrets. His door had frosted glass and gold lettering that looked like it had been there since the 1940s. Inside, the space was cluttered but organized. File cabinets lined the walls. A computer hummed on a desk, covered with papers. Wallace himself was older than she expected, with silver hair and eyes that had seen enough human suffering to stop being surprised by any of it. "Sit down, Mrs. Bradford." She remained standing. "Just show me what you found." He slid a thick file across the desk. She picked it up, started flipping through. The first thing she saw was a photograph. A woman, maybe 40, with tired eyes and kind features. Not glamorous, not the type she had imagined when she pictured the other woman. This woman looked like someone who worked hard and got little credit for it. Someone who had been carrying heavy things alone for too long. That's Diana Moreau, 41 years old, former nurse, lives in Westbrook, Connecticut. Connecticut. Not a Manhattan penthouse, not some luxury love nest. A modest house in a suburb an hour outside the city. She has 2 children. Elena's hands tightened on the file. She kept turning pages. Photographs of a girl, maybe 16 or 17, dark curly hair, confident posture, holding an academic award in one shot, laughing with friends in another. And then Elena saw the girl's eyes. She stopped breathing. Gray-green, flecked with gold around the edges. She had spent years looking at those eyes in old family photographs. Richard's grandmother, Catherine, had those eyes. Richard had a version of them. Elena had always hoped Daniel would inherit them, but he had gotten her brown eyes instead. This girl, this teenager in Connecticut, she had Catherine's eyes. "Keep turning," Wallace's voice was gentle. "The worst is still coming." The next page was a birth certificate. Father, Richard James Bradford. Daughter, Sophie Rose Moreau. Date of birth, 17 years ago. Elena did the math without wanting to. 17 years ago, she and Richard had been married for 6 years. They had been trying to have children for 4 of those years. Failing, grieving, trying again. She had spent those years injecting hormones that made her body swell and ache, crying in bathroom stalls after negative pregnancy tests, apologizing to her husband for what she believed was her broken body. And the entire time, he already had a daughter. The birth certificate says Richard Bradford is the father, Wallace continued. But there's more. Look at the bank records. She turned more pages. Account statements showing monthly transfers, $8,000 every month for 17 years, from an account in Richard's name to an account in Diana's name. He's been paying child support for 17 years, and I never knew. There's a second child, Wallace pointed to another photograph. A boy, maybe 12, but his father is someone else. Diana moved on eventually. However, the payments increased after the boy was born, and there are college funds set up for both children. Both. Richard is paying for a child that isn't his. He seems to have taken responsibility for the household, making sure his daughter has a stable home, even if he couldn't be part of it. Couldn't or wouldn't? Wallace shrugged. That's not my job to determine. My job was to find the facts. The facts are in that file. Elena sank into the chair she had refused earlier. Her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. How long did the affair last? Wallace hesitated. That's where it gets complicated. More complicated than this? The affair happened before your marriage. Richard was involved with Diana when his mother was sick. She was a nurse at the hospital. They had a relationship for about 4 months. He ended it when he met you. Before our marriage? Yes, but the pregnancy, he found out about the pregnancy 3 months after your wedding. Elena closed her eyes. She could see it now, could almost reconstruct the timeline in her head. Richard, newly married, just starting to build his life with her, receiving news that the woman he had left was carrying his child. What did he do? According to everything I could find, he offered to provide financially, but he told Diana he couldn't be part of the child's life, not publicly. Not publicly. The words tasted like ash in her mouth. She moved to Connecticut. She raised the girl alone. Richard sent money every month, but he's only seen Sophie twice in her entire life. Twice in 17 years? The file contained more, correspondence between Richard and Diana, mostly about financial matters, early emails from Diana pleading for him to be involved. Sophie asked about you today. She wanted to know if her daddy would come to her school play. Richard's responses were always the same, formal, distant, redirecting to money. I've increased the monthly payment. Please let me know if you need anything else. She read email after email, year after year, of a woman asking for presents and receiving only checks, year after year of a daughter growing up knowing her father existed and chose not to know her. One email stood out, dated when Sophie was 10. She found your picture online. She knows who you are now. She knows you're rich and famous and chose not to know her. I hope your empire keeps you warm at night, because your daughter certainly won't. Richard's response was exactly what Elena would have predicted by then. I understand you're upset. I've set up an additional fund for her education. Always money, never presents, never the one thing a child actually needs. Elena looked up from the file. Her eyes were dry. She hadn't cried once. Is there anything else I should know? Wallace met her gaze. You have a decision to make, Mrs. Bradford. What you do with this information is your choice. But I've been doing this job for 30 years, and I've learned something about situations like this. What's that? The truth doesn't fix anything on its own. It just gives you the foundation to build something new. Whether you build something better or burn everything down, that's up to you. She gathered the file, stood, put money on his desk, more than he had asked for. Thank you for your honesty, Mrs. Bradford. She paused at the door. Whatever you decide, I hope it brings you peace. You deserve that. She didn't know if she deserved peace, but she was going to find it anyway, whatever that required. But what Elena does next, nobody sees it coming. Not Diana, not Richard, not even herself. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do isn't scream or cry or seek revenge. Sometimes it's something completely unexpected, something that will change everyone's life forever. Stay with me because part 2 is going to blow your mind. She didn't go home that night. She couldn't face Richard yet, couldn't look at his face knowing what she now knew. She checked into a hotel in the city. A nice one, because she could afford it, because 23 years of marriage to a billionaire meant she had access to accounts that would let her disappear for a while if she needed to. She spread the file across the hotel bed, read everything again, then again. It was 3 in the morning when she found the letters. Not emails, actual letters. Diana had written them and never sent them, but somehow Wallace had obtained copies. Maybe from a cloud backup, maybe from somewhere else. Elena didn't ask questions about his methods. The first letter was dated 6 months after Sophie was born. Dear Richard, I know you said you can't be part of her life. I know you have your reasons, but she smiled at me today. Real smile, not gas, not reflex. She looked right at me and smiled like she knew exactly who I was, and all I could think was that you should be here to see this. She has your mother's eyes, Richard, the eyes from all those photographs you showed me. She's beautiful and perfect and half yours, and you're missing everything. Please, please reconsider. The second letter was from when Sophie was 2. She said her first word today. It wasn't mama, it was light. She pointed at the ceiling fan and said light like she'd discovered something miraculous. I called my mother to tell her and she was happy for me, but all I could think was that there's no one here who shares my blood and hers, no one who understands what it means that she exists. You should know these things. She's your daughter too. There were more letters, one for every major milestone. First steps, first day of school, first time she asked about her father. Mommy, why does everyone else have a daddy and I don't? What did you tell her? That her daddy lives far away and can't visit. That was a lie. Richard lived an hour away. He chose not to visit. There was a difference. The letters stopped when Sophie was 7. Diana had written one final letter, different from all the others. I'm done, Richard. Done begging, done hoping, done waiting for you to become the man I thought you were. You're not going to change. You're never going to show up. And I can't keep writing letters into the void pretending someday you'll read them and realize what you're missing. My daughter deserves better than a ghost for a father. From now on, I'll tell her the truth. Not all of it, just enough. That you knew about her and chose money over presence. That she isn't unwanted. That the failing was yours, not hers. She'll grow up knowing her worth comes from herself, not from you. And maybe someday, when she's older, she'll find you and demand the answers I stopped demanding years ago. Or maybe she'll decide you're not worth finding. Either way, I'm done asking. Goodbye, Richard. Elena read that letter 3 times, then set it down and stared at the wall. She had spent the last 2 weeks preparing herself for the worst, preparing for evidence of an ongoing affair, of duplicity, of a husband who had been living a double life of romantic deception. This was different. This was worse in some ways, less in others. Richard hadn't continued the affair after their marriage. The relationship with Diana was over before they ever exchanged vows. But the child, the daughter he had known about for 17 years and chosen not to know, the mother he had supported with money but nothing else, the lies he had maintained year after year, while Elena struggled with fertility treatments and blamed herself for their difficulty conceiving. That was a betrayal deeper than sex. That was a betrayal of truth itself. She didn't sleep that night. When morning came, she showered, put on clothes, and did something no one would have predicted. She found Diana Moreau's phone number in the file, stared at it for 10 minutes, then dialed. The phone rang 4 times before someone answered. Hello? The voice was cautious, tired, the voice of someone who stopped expecting good things from unexpected phone calls. Diana, This is Elena Bradford, Richard's wife. Silence. Long enough that Elena thought the call had dropped. Then, quietly, I don't want any trouble. Whatever he told you, I'm not trying to cause problems. I haven't asked him for anything beyond what he already sends. Please. I'm not calling to threaten you. Then why are you calling? Elena looked out the hotel window at the city waking up below. Taxis and pedestrians and normal people starting normal days. Because I need to understand, and because I think your daughter, our daughter, deserves better than what Richard gave her, what he gave both of you. Another long silence. Then Diana said something Elena didn't expect. Our? Sophie didn't ask for any of this. Neither did you, neither did I. Richard failed all of us in different ways. I'm calling because I don't want his failure to define the rest of this story. She could hear Diana breathing on the other end, processing, deciding. When do you want to meet? As soon as possible. There's a cafe in Westbrook on Main Street. Tomorrow at 2? I'll be there. Elena, Diana's voice was careful. Why are you really doing this? Because I've spent 23 years believing I was part of a complete story, and I just found out the story was missing half its characters. She hung up before Diana could ask any more questions. She didn't have answers yet. She only had instincts, and her instincts were telling her that the path forward wasn't destruction. It was something else entirely. Now, I need you to really think about this for a moment. If you discovered your husband had a secret family, would you call the other woman? Would you drive to meet her face to face, not to scream or threaten, but to understand? Most people would lawyer up. Most people would go scorched earth. Elena is doing something completely different. The next afternoon, Elena drove to Westbrook. The town was exactly what she had expected from the photographs. Tree-lined streets, modest houses with swing sets in the yards, the kind of place that knew their neighbors and gossip traveled faster than the sound of speed. The cafe was small, local, the kind of place that survived on regulars rather than tourists. Diana was already there when Elena arrived, sitting at a corner table, hands wrapped around a cup of tea that probably gone cold. She looked up when Elena entered. Their eyes met across the room. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Elena walked over and sat down. Thank you for meeting me. Diana studied her face, looking for angles probably, looking for threats, looking for all the things she had learned to expect from people connected to Richard Bradford. I didn't sleep last night. Couldn't figure out why you'd want to talk to me instead of, I don't know, suing me or having me investigated or whatever rich people do when they find out their husbands have been paying child support for 17 years. I already had you investigated. That's how I found out about all of this. Diana flinched slightly, then nodded. Fair enough. I'm not here to sue you or threaten you or make your life more difficult than Richard already has. I'm here to understand. Understand what? Everything. How it started, how it ended, why he made the choices he made, why you stayed quiet all these years. Diana laughed, but there was no humor in it. I stayed quiet because I had no choice. He made that clear from the beginning. He would provide financially, but if I ever went public, if I ever threatened his precious reputation, the money would stop. And I had a baby. I had no family support, no savings, no way to make it work on my own, so I took his terms, because that was all I could do. Elena absorbed this. You should know I'm not defending him. I'm not here to excuse what he did. Then what are you here for? To figure out what comes next, for me, for you, for Sophie. Diana's eyes widened slightly at the name. You know her name? I know everything. I've read the file, I've seen the photographs, I've read the letters you wrote and never sent. Diana paled. How did you get those? It doesn't matter. What matters is that I know, and now I have to decide what to do with that knowledge. The tea had definitely gone cold by now. Diana pushed it aside. What do you want from me? I want you to tell me about her, about Sophie. Who is she? What is she like? What kind of person did she grow up to be? And then Diana did something Elena didn't expect. She started to cry. Not dramatic sobbing, just quiet tears sliding down her cheeks, as if she had been holding them back for years and finally found permission to let them fall. She's extraordinary, brilliant, top of her class. She wants to study engineering, if you can believe that. She's been building things since she was 5 years old, taking apart electronics, figuring out how they work, putting them back together better than before. Elena thought of Richard, thought of the empire he had built from a garage startup, the same drive, the same mechanical mind. Blood-telling. She's also angry, Diana wiped her eyes. She hides it well, but I can see it. When other kids talk about their fathers, when there are father-daughter events at school, when she sees families that look different from ours, she pretends it doesn't bother her, but it does. Has she ever tried to contact him? Once, when she was 13, she found his email address and wrote him a letter, very formal, very careful. She asked if they could meet, just once, just so she could see his face in person. What did he say? He didn't respond. She checked her email every day for 3 months. Nothing.
Elena closed her eyes. The cruelty of it. The casual, devastating cruelty of ignoring a child's request to simply know her father. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate, but she said them anyway. I'm sorry for what he did to you. I'm sorry for what he did to her. I'm sorry that I didn't know, because if I had known, I would have what? I don't know. Something. Anything. This. Diana studied her for a long moment. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? I expected you to hate me. You're the wife. I'm the other woman. That's how these stories usually go. Elena shook her head. You were the other woman for 4 months, 17 years ago, before I was even in the picture. After that, you were just a single mother trying to survive. I have no interest in hating you for that. Then who are you going to hate? I haven't decided yet. Elena paused. Maybe no one. Maybe hate isn't the answer. Diana leaned back in her chair. That's a remarkably enlightened response from someone who just found out their husband has been lying to them for over 2 decades. I grew up with nothing, in an apartment above a dry cleaner in Newark. My father left 3 times before my mother finally locked him out for good. I learned early that rage is expensive. It costs energy you can't afford to waste. So I learned to think instead of react, to plan instead of explode. And what's your plan now? I want to meet Sophie. Whatever Diana had been expecting, it wasn't that. You want to meet my daughter? Our daughter, in a sense. I've been married to her father for 23 years. That makes her her stepmother, whether any of us realized it or not. She doesn't know you exist. I know, but she knows Richard exists. She knows he's a billionaire who chose not to know her. She knows she has a half-brother she's never met. There are pieces of her story she doesn't have yet. I want to give them to her. Diana shook her head slowly. You don't understand. Sophie isn't like me. She doesn't just accept things. She questions everything, challenges everything. If you show up claiming to want some kind of relationship, she's going to interrogate your motives until she's satisfied you're not hiding anything. Good. Elena stood. She should interrogate me. She's earned that right. What are you going to tell her? The truth. That I didn't know about her. That her father lied to me too. That I'm not here because I want something from her, but because I think she deserves to know that the world isn't divided into people who abandoned her and people who didn't care. There's a third category. People who didn't know. People who would have cared if they'd been given the chance. Diana was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone. She gets home from school at 3:30. That gives you about an hour to figure out what you're going to say. You're letting me meet her? Just like that? Just like that. Because honestly, Elena, You're the first person connected to Richard who has ever shown up wanting to give something instead of take something. That has to mean something. Elena hoped it did. She hoped she was making the right choice. She hoped this wouldn't blow up in everyone's faces. But standing still had never been her style. Not when she was a girl above the dry cleaner in Newark. Not when she was a caterer's assistant serving champagne to billionaires. Not now when her marriage was crumbling and her husband's secrets were finally coming to light. Forward was the only direction that mattered. Even when forward meant walking into a house in Connecticut to meet a 17-year-old girl with Richard's mother's eyes and a lifetime of justified anger. Diana's house was exactly what the photographs had shown. Modest, well-maintained, a swing set in the backyard that probably saw better days but was still standing, window boxes with late-season flowers that someone actually cared for. Everything opposite to the penthouse Elena had left behind. Everything real in a way that glass towers and imported linens could never be. She parked on the street and sat in her car for 5 minutes, watching the house, gathering her courage. She had faced hostile boardrooms. She had navigated charity galas full of people who smiled to your face and whispered behind your back. She had survived a childhood that should have broken her. But this was different. This was a 17-year-old girl who had every reason to hate anything connected to Richard, including his wife. The front door opened before Elena could decide whether to approach. Sophie stood in the doorway, tall for her age, lean, with that dark curly hair from the photographs and those unmistakable gray-green eyes. She was wearing jeans and a sweatshirt that said "Future Engineer" in faded letters. No makeup, no pretense. She looked at Elena's car, at Elena herself, with an expression that gave nothing away. You're her, the wife. Elena got out of the car, walked up the path, stopped at the bottom of the porch steps, giving Sophie the higher ground. I'm Elena, and yes, I'm married to your father. For now. For now? Sophie repeated the words like she was testing them. What does that mean? It means I just found out about you 3 days ago. It means everything I thought I knew about my marriage was a lie. It means I'm still figuring out what comes next. Sophie's jaw tightened. My mom says you want to talk to me. If you're willing. Why would I be willing? I don't know you. You don't know me. The only thing we have in common is a man who apparently lied to both of us. That's exactly why I want to talk. Sophie studied her for a long moment. Then she stepped aside and gestured toward the door. Fine, but I'm not offering you tea or whatever rich people expect when they visit. This isn't that kind of conversation. I don't expect anything. I just want to listen. The inside of the house was small but warm. Photographs everywhere. Sophie as a baby, a toddler, a gap-toothed first grader. Sophie at science fairs and soccer games and birthday parties. A life documented in images that didn't include Richard, that didn't include Elena either. She had missed all of this, not by choice, but by ignorance, and ignorance, she was learning, was its own kind of failure. Sophie led her to a living room with a worn couch and a coffee table covered in textbooks. She sat on one end, Elena sat on the other. Diana hovered in the doorway for a moment, then retreated to the kitchen, close enough to intervene if needed, far enough to give them privacy. So, Sophie's voice was sharp, you didn't know about me. No. For 17 years you had no idea I existed. None. And you expect me to believe that? I don't expect anything. I'm telling you the truth. What you do with it is your choice. Sophie's jaw tightened. My mom says you found out from a private investigator, that you hired someone to dig into Richard's secrets. That's correct. Why? If you didn't know about me, why were you investigating him? Elena reached into her purse, pulled out the receipt she had been carrying for weeks now, the one that started everything. I found this in his pocket. I was taking his suit to the dry cleaner. Sophie took the receipt, read it. Her expression flickered for just a moment before she smoothed it away. Diana, that's my mom's name. I know. He bought her a necklace, $14,000. I know that too. Sophie set the receipt on the coffee table, pushed it away like it was contaminated. He sends money every month, has for my whole life, but he's never bought her jewelry before, at least not that I know of. Maybe he was feeling guilty. Maybe he was trying to make up for something. I don't know his reasons. I stopped trying to understand his reasons the moment I realized how many lies he'd told. Sophie was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, younger, more vulnerable. I Googled him when I was 10, found out who he really was, saw the pictures of him at fancy events with you on his arm, read articles about his company, his success, his perfect life. Elena waited. I used to imagine what it would be like if he showed up one day, if he knocked on our door and said he was sorry and wanted to be part of my life. I used to practice what I would say to him. What would you have said? I don't know anymore. I stopped practicing when I was 13. After you emailed him and he didn't respond?
Sophie's eyes widened. How do you know about that? The investigator was thorough. He found the email you sent, the one asking if you could meet him just once, just to see his face. Sophie stood abruptly, walked to the window. Her back was to Elena, but her shoulders were shaking slightly. He never answered. I checked my email every day for months. I thought maybe it went to spam, maybe he didn't see it, maybe there was some explanation. There was no explanation. Elena's voice was gentle. He saw it. He chose not to respond. How do you know? Because I know him. 23 years of marriage taught me something about how he operates. He doesn't ignore things by accident. He ignores them by design. Sophie turned around. Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. Why are you telling me this? Why are you here? What do you want from me? I don't want anything from you. Everyone wants something. Not everyone. Elena stood, walked toward her slowly, giving her space to retreat if she needed it. I'm here because you deserve to know that not everyone in your father's life is like him. I didn't know about you. I would never have allowed him to abandon you if I had known. I would have fought for you to be part of our family, whether he wanted that or not. You don't even know me. I know enough. I know you're brilliant, top of your class, heading to study engineering. I know you've been angry for years and hiding it because you didn't want to burden your mother with more pain. I know you deserve a father who shows up, and you got one who sends checks instead. That's not knowing me, that's reading a file. Then let me know you, the real you, not the version in the photographs or the report. Let me earn that. Sophie stared at her. The skepticism was still there, but underneath it, something else was emerging. Curiosity, maybe, or hope, buried so deep she had probably forgotten it existed. Why would you want that? I'm not your daughter. I'm not your responsibility. I'm just evidence that your husband is a liar. You're not evidence of anything. Elena's voice cracked slightly. You're a person, a remarkable person from what I can tell, and you've spent 17 years being treated like a secret, like something shameful, like a problem to be managed with money. I'm not interested in treating you that way. Then how do you want to treat me? Like family? Because whether anyone planned it or not, that's what we are. The words hung in the air between them. Sophie wiped her eyes quickly, like she was embarrassed to be crying. I don't know how to do that. Have family, I mean. It's always just been me and my mom and Thomas, my brother, but he has a different dad. He doesn't understand what it's like. I don't know how to do it either. Elena smiled sadly. I thought I had a family. Turns out I only had half of one. Maybe we can figure it out together. Sophie was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that surprised them both. He has another kid, right? A son? Daniel, yes. He's 28, about to get married. Does he know about me? Not yet, but he will. Are you going to tell him? Yes. What if he doesn't want to know me either? Then that will be his loss.
but I don't think that's who Daniel is. He's a good person, better than his father in a lot of ways. Sophie sat back down on the couch, pulled her knees up to her chest, making herself smaller. This is a lot. I know. I need time to process. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. Sophie looked at her. Really looked, like she was seeing her for the first time. You're weird. Rich wives don't usually want to meet the secret kids. I'm not a rich wife. I'm a woman who grew up with nothing, married a man I thought I could trust, and just found out I was wrong about almost everything. The money isn't who I am. It's just where I ended up. Diana appeared in the doorway. Everything okay in here? Sophie nodded slowly. Yeah, we're okay. Elena stood. I should go, but I want you to have this. She pulled a card from her purse. Nothing fancy, just her phone number and one sentence written in her own handwriting. I'm here if you ever want to talk. Sophie took the card, read it, looked up at Elena with an expression that was impossible to read. What if I never call? Then I'll understand, but I hope you do. Elena walked to the door. Diana stopped her with a hand on her arm. Thank you for not being what I expected. Thank you for letting me meet her. She's extraordinary. I know. Diana's eyes filled with tears. I just wish her father knew it too. Maybe someday he will, or maybe he won't. Either way, she has you, and now, if she wants it, she has me too. What happens next will shock you even more, because Elena isn't done, not even close. She's about to do something that will change everything. For Sophie, for Daniel, for Richard, for everyone. Stay with me. Part 3 is where everything explodes.
Elena drove back to the city that night. She didn't return to the penthouse. She wasn't ready for that yet. Instead, she checked into the same hotel as before and sat in the dark, thinking about everything that had happened. 3 days ago, she had been a billionaire's wife with a perfect life and a husband she trusted completely. Now she was something else entirely, a woman standing in the wreckage of everything she thought she knew, trying to build something new from the rubble. The next morning, she called her lawyer. The divorce papers were drawn up within a week. Elena didn't seek vengeance. She didn't try to destroy Richard or take everything he had built. That would have required energy she wanted to spend elsewhere. She asked for the Manhattan townhouse, a fair financial settlement, her dignity. Richard didn't fight her on any of it. When they sat across from each other in the lawyer's office, signing documents that would end 23 years of marriage, he looked like a man who had finally run out of lies to tell. Elena, I'm sorry. I know. I never meant for any of this to happen. But it did happen. You made choices, Richard. Every day for 17 years you woke up and chose to keep lying. That wasn't an accident. That was a pattern. He had no defense. She hadn't expected one. What are you going to do now? I'm going to build a life that doesn't include you at the center of it. I'm going to get to know your daughter, since you never bothered to. I'm going to help her in ways you never would. Richard flinched. She's not your responsibility. No, she's yours, but you abandoned that responsibility 17 years ago. Someone has to step in. The papers were signed. The marriage was over. Elena walked out of that office feeling lighter than she had in months. The weight of the lies was no longer hers to carry. Now she had to tell Daniel. She met her son at a quiet restaurant, neutral territory, somewhere they could talk without being overheard or interrupted. Daniel arrived looking worried. He had been worried since she moved out of the penthouse, since she stopped answering Richard's calls, since the word divorce started circulating through their social circle. Mom, what's going on? You've been shutting everyone out for weeks. I know, I'm sorry. I needed time to figure out how to tell you this. Tell me what? Elena took a deep breath, looked at her son, this young man she had raised, who had Richard's ambition but her compassion, who deserved the truth even if it hurt. Your father has another child, a daughter. Her name is Sophie.
She's 17 years old. Daniel's face went through a series of emotions so quickly she could barely track them. Confusion, disbelief, anger, something that looked like grief. What do you mean, another child? I mean exactly what I said. 17 years ago, before you were born, your father had an affair. The woman got pregnant. He's been paying child support ever since, but he never told anyone. Not me, not you, no one. Daniel sat back in his chair like he'd been physically pushed. 17 years. He's known for 17 years and never said anything? That's correct. I have a sister. Half-sister, but yes. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was shaking. Does she know about me? She does now. I met her last week. You met her? Before telling me? I needed to understand the situation before I involved you. I needed to make sure she was real, that this wasn't some kind of mistake or misunderstanding. And she's real. She's brilliant and angry, and she's been growing up an hour away from us this whole time, knowing her father chose money over presents. Daniel closed his eyes. He looked like he was trying to hold himself together. How could he do this? How could he let me grow up thinking I was his only child when he had a daughter out there who needed him? I don't know. I've asked myself the same question 100 times. What are you going to do? I've already filed for divorce. The papers were signed yesterday. Daniel nodded. That makes sense. I would do the same thing. What about you? What do you want to do? I don't know. He opened his eyes, looked at her. I don't know if I can face him right now. I don't know what I would say. You don't have to say anything. Whatever you decide about your relationship with your father is your choice. I'm not going to pressure you either way. And this girl, Sophie, that's your choice too. But Daniel, she didn't ask for any of this. Neither did her mother. They were both victims of your father's lies, just like we were. Daniel was quiet again. Then he asked the question she had been waiting for. What's she like? Elena smiled, the first real smile she had felt in weeks. She's like you in some ways. Driven, smart, determined to make something of herself despite the obstacles in her way. But she's also angry. She spent her whole life knowing her father existed and chose to not know her. That kind of rejection leaves marks. I want to meet her. Are you sure? No, but I think I need to. I think I need to see her face and understand that she's real before I can process any of this. I can arrange that if you're ready. Not yet. Give me a few days. I need to figure out how to be in the same room with the idea of her before I can be in the same room with her. Take all the time you need. Daniel stood, came around the table, hugged her tightly. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry he did this to you. He did it to all of us, but we're going to survive it. We always do. The meeting between Daniel and Sophie happened 3 weeks later. Elena arranged it carefully. Neutral ground, a coffee shop midway between the city and Westbrook. No parents present, just the two of them. She got the story from both of them later, piecing together what had happened from their separate accounts. Daniel arrived first, sat at a corner table, ordered coffee he didn't drink. Sophie arrived exactly on time, walked in like she was prepared for battle, saw him at the table and stopped. They looked at each other for a long moment, two strangers who shared blood but nothing else. So, Sophie sat down across from him, I guess we're related? I guess so.
Silence stretched between them. Awkward, uncomfortable, neither of them knowing how to bridge the gap. This is weird, Marcus finally said. Extremely weird. I didn't know you existed until 3 weeks ago. I've known you existed for years, saw your pictures online, read about your accomplishments. You graduated from Harvard, started your own consulting firm, you're getting married. Daniel blinked. You know all that? I Googled you. back when I was still hoping our father might show up someday. I wanted to know what my competition looked like. Competition? For his attention, for his time, for whatever scraps of fatherhood he might be willing to give. She laughed bitterly. Turns out there was no competition. He wasn't giving anything to either of us. He coached my little league team. Sophie went still. When? When I was 7, he was there every Saturday morning, taught me how to throw a curveball. The silence that followed was painful. I asked him to come to my school play once, when I was 5. My mom helped me write him a letter. He never responded. Daniel didn't know what to say. There was nothing to say. I'm not telling you that to make you feel guilty. Sophie's voice softened slightly. I'm just saying we had very different experiences of the same man. You got the version who showed up. I got the version who sent checks. I'm sorry. It's not your fault. You didn't ask to be born any more than I did. Another long pause. Then Daniel asked the question that had been bothering him since he found out. What do you want from all this? From meeting me? From meeting my mom? From all of it? Sophie considered the question carefully. I don't know. For a long time, I wanted answers. I wanted to understand why I wasn't good enough, why he chose your family over mine, why being his secret was preferable to being his daughter. And now? Now I think I understand that those questions don't have answers, at least not answers that would make me feel better. He made his choices. They were selfish, cowardly choices. Understanding his reasons wouldn't change that. So what do you want instead? I want to know who I am without him. I want to stop being defined by his absence. I want to build a life that isn't shaped by the hole he left. That sounds healthy. It's something my therapist and I have been working on. She smiled slightly. You should try therapy. It helps. Daniel laughed. The tension broke slightly. I probably should. This is a lot to process. Tell me about it. They talked for 2 more hours. About their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. About what it felt like to be Richard Bradford's child. Wanted and unwanted. Seen and invisible. By the time they left, something had shifted. Not friendship exactly. Not yet. But the beginning of something. When Daniel called Elena that night, his voice was different, lighter. She's remarkable. I know. I think I want to get to know her, really know her, not just as my father's mistake, but as my sister. I think she would like that. This is going to take time. Everything worth doing takes time. Elena paused. I'm proud of you, Daniel. For what? For showing up, for being open, for not letting his failures become yours. I learned that from you. The foundation came next. Elena had always been involved in charity work. It was expected of billionaires' wives, but most of that involvement had been surface level, galas and auctions and checks written to causes she barely understood. This was different. This was personal. She used part of her divorce settlement to establish the Bridge Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting single mothers, particularly those raising children alone because fathers had chosen absence over presence. Diana became an unlikely advisor. Her years of experience navigating the system, understanding what single mothers actually needed versus what donors thought they needed, proved invaluable. I never expected this, Diana said one afternoon, sitting in Elena's new apartment, smaller than the penthouse, but more hers. I never expected us to become friends. Neither did I, but here we are. Here we are. The Foundation's first scholarship went to a young woman whose story mirrored Sophie's, a brilliant girl with an absent father and a mother who had worked 3 jobs to keep her in school. Elena spoke at the ceremony. I learned something important this year. Betrayal doesn't have to define you. Pain doesn't have to make you small.
You can take the worst thing that ever happened to you and transform it into something that helps others. That's what this foundation is about. Not charity, transformation. Sophie was in the audience. When their eyes met, she nodded slightly, the closest thing to approval she had ever given. 6 months after the discovery, something unexpected happened. Sophie called Elena one evening, her voice tight with anger. "Did you set up a scholarship in my name?" Elena had been expecting this call. "I don't know what you mean. There's an announcement at my school, the Sophie Morrow STEM Scholarship, $50,000 annually for young women pursuing engineering or science degrees. Anonymous donor. But somehow I don't think it's actually anonymous. Why would you think it was me? Because nobody else would do something like this. Nobody else even knows who I am." Elena was quiet for a moment. "You deserve recognition. You deserve to have your name attached to something that helps other girls like you. Something that says you matter, that your story matters. You can't just do things like this without asking me." "Why not?" "Because it's my name, my identity. You don't get to use it for your charity projects without permission." "You're right." Elena's voice softened. "I'm sorry. I should have asked. I was so focused on what I thought you needed that I didn't stop to ask what you actually wanted." Sophie was quiet on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, her voice was different, smaller. "Nobody's ever named anything after me before. I know. It feels strange, like I'm supposed to be important or something."
You are important. You've always been important. You just had a father who was too blind to see it. Silence. Then, quietly, "Thank you. I think I'm still mad at you for not asking." You can be mad and grateful at the same time. Those feelings can coexist. My therapist says the same thing. Your therapist is very wise. She's okay. Sophie paused. "The scholarship is actually really cool. Some girl is going to get the opportunity I never had. That's the idea." "Okay, I forgive you, but ask next time." "I will." "Good night, Elena." "Good night, Sophie." She hung up the phone, smiling. It was the first time Sophie had ever called her by her first name. It felt like progress. Richard tried to rebuild. It didn't go well. He showed up in Westbrook one afternoon, unannounced, carrying gifts and apologies 17 years too late. Sophie listened to his speech, the rehearsed regret, the promises to do better, the explanations that explained nothing. Then she delivered the verdict. "You don't get to decide when you're ready to be a father. That's not how it works. You're ready when your child needs you, or you're not a father at all. You're just a stranger with a checkbook." Richard tried to respond. She cut him off. "I needed you when I was 5 and asking about father-daughter dances. I needed you when I was 10 and the other kids made fun of me for not having a dad. I needed you when I was 13 and I emailed you and you couldn't even bother to write back one sentence." "Sophie, but I don't need you anymore. I've spent 17 years learning how to survive without you. I'm very good at it. And now you want to show up with gifts and tears and expect me to what? Forgive you? Welcome you with open arms? Pretend the last 17 years didn't happen? I want a chance to make things right." "You can't make things right. That's what you don't understand. The things you missed, they're gone. My first word, my first steps, my first day of school, every birthday, every Christmas, every moment where a father should have been there. You can't get those back. Neither can I." "So what are you saying? There's no path forward?" "I'm saying the path forward doesn't look like what you want it to look like. I'm saying you don't get to set the terms. I'm saying if there's ever going to be any kind of relationship between us, it will be on my timeline, at my pace, when I'm ready, not when it's convenient for your conscience." Richard left that conversation looking like a man who had finally seen the full scope of his failures.
Elena heard about it later from Diana and felt something she didn't expect. Not satisfaction, not triumph, sadness. Sadness for the family that could have existed, for the daughter who had grown up in absence, for the man who had been too afraid of losing control to accept the beautiful chaos of honest love. The heart attack came 8 months after Elena first found the receipt. Daniel called her in the middle of the night. His voice was shaking. "Mom, you need to come to the hospital. Dad collapsed during a board meeting. They're saying it's bad." She could have stayed away. She owed Richard nothing. Their divorce was final. Their marriage was over in every way that mattered. But Daniel was sobbing in a waiting room, and somewhere in Connecticut, Sophie had just learned that the father she was still deciding whether to forgive might die before she got the chance. Elena went to the hospital. Richard was conscious when she entered his room, pale, diminished, surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed and tracked the fragile rhythms of his heart. "You came." "I came for Daniel and for Sophie." He accepted this without argument. "I called her this morning, before the meeting, before the—" He gestured weakly at the tubes running into his arm. "What did you say?" "That I was sorry, that I should have chosen differently, that being vulnerable terrified me, and it cost me everything that mattered." Elena sat down, not close, but present. "You didn't tell me the truth 23 years ago." "I know. I might have stayed anyway, or I might have left, but it would have been my choice." "I know. You took that choice away from me. You let me build my entire life on a foundation you knew was unstable." Richard's eyes filled with tears. "I took everything away from everyone, and now I'm lying here wondering if I'll get the chance to try to fix any of it." Elena looked at this man she had loved for so many years, this stranger she had shared a bed with, this coward who had built empires because he was too afraid to build honest relationships. "I'm not going to forgive you, not completely. Some wounds leave scars that never fully heal." "I know. But I'm not going to spend my remaining years hating you either. That's a prison I'm not interested in." She stood, walked to the door. "Sophie is extraordinary. You should know that. You had nothing to do with it, but you should know." "I know." "No, you don't, not really. But maybe if you try very hard and don't mess it up again, you'll get the chance to learn." Richard survived the surgery, barely. During his recovery, something shifted, slowly, painfully, in increments almost too small to measure. Sophie visited him in the hospital, not to forgive, not to reconcile, but to see him, to sit with the reality of who he was instead of the ghost she had been fighting her whole life. They talked carefully, like two people navigating a minefield. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to call you Dad," she said one afternoon. "That word means something to me. It means showing up, being present, earning the right to be called that. You haven't earned it. I understand. But I'm willing to try to see who you are now instead of hating who you were then. That's not forgiveness. It's just openness. I'll take whatever you're willing to give me." "Good, because that's all I have right now." Daniel and Sophie grew closer during those weeks, bonded by the shared strangeness of being Richard Bradford's children, wanted and unwanted, known and unknown. They went to dinner together, just the two of them, without parents, without history, just a brother and sister learning how to be siblings. "This is still weird," Daniel said over pasta one evening. "Extremely weird," Sophie agreed. "But good weird?" She considered the question. "Maybe. I always wondered what it would be like to have a brother, someone who understood what it was like to be connected to him. And now you know?" "Now I know. It's different than I imagined. Better or worse? Just different." She smiled. "But I think I could get used to it." What comes next is going to make you believe in second chances, in redemption, in the power of a woman who refuses to let her betrayal define her future. Part 4 is where healing begins. Stay with me. Daniel's wedding happened a year after Elena found the receipt. She had chosen her seat carefully, close enough to see everything, far enough to maintain her hard-won peace. Richard was there, thinner, slower, still recovering, but present. Sophie sat near him, not touching, not completely comfortable, but there. Diana was invited but declined. Some distances couldn't be bridged by wedding receptions. Elena understood. The ceremony was beautiful. Sophia looked radiant. Daniel looked happier than Elena had ever seen him. During the vows, she watched Richard watching his son, saw something in his face that might have been regret, or longing, or the painful recognition of everything he had almost lost. Sophie caught Elena's eye across the room. She nodded slightly, not quite smiling, but something close. Acknowledgement, connection, built from wreckage. Daniel's toast included an unexpected line. "I want to thank my mother for teaching me that families aren't always what you expect, for showing me that the people who choose to show up for you matter more than the people who share your blood, for proving that you can take something broken and make it into something new." Elena's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, of something earned. "And I want to acknowledge my sister, who I only met a year ago, who taught me that strength comes in different forms. Sophie, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're part of this family. However we got here, whatever it took, I wouldn't have it any other way." Sophie's face crumpled. For just a moment, the tough exterior fell away, and she was just a girl who had finally been claimed, finally been seen, finally been welcomed. Diana had sent a card. Daniel read part of it aloud. "To Daniel and Sophia, may your family be built on truth, even when truth is hard. May you choose each other every day, especially on the days when it would be easier not to. And may you always remember that love is not something you fall into, it is something you build, brick by brick, choice by choice, year by year. Congratulations." After the reception, Elena found herself alone on a balcony overlooking the same city she had watched from penthouse windows for 23 years. It looked different now, smaller somehow, less intimidating. Richard appeared beside her, not too close, respecting the distance that would always exist between them. It was a beautiful ceremony. It was. "You raised a good man, Elena." "I did. I wish I had been more like you, more present, more honest, more willing to let people see who I really was." She looked at him, this man she had loved, this stranger she had married, this cautionary tale she would carry with her forever. "It's not too late to start." "Do you really believe that?" "I believe people can change if they want to, if they're willing to do the work. I'm willing." "Then do the work, not for me, not for absolution, for Sophie, for Daniel, for whoever you might have been if you hadn't spent your whole life running from yourself." He nodded slowly. She could see him processing, deciding whether to take her words seriously or file them away with all the other truths he had avoided. "Thank you for not destroying me. You could have. I gave you every reason." "Destroying you would have destroyed me too. I chose a different path." "A better path?" "A harder path, but yes, better." She turned to go back inside. He stopped her with one final question. "Do you think they'll ever forgive me, Daniel and Sophie?" "I don't know. That's not up to me. But if you had to guess." Elena considered the question carefully. "I think Daniel already has, mostly. He's young, he has less scar tissue. Sophie will take longer, maybe forever, but she's trying. That's more than you deserve." "I know." "Good. Knowing that is the first step." She left him there on the balcony, looking out at the city he had conquered, surrounded by the wealth he had accumulated, finally beginning to understand how little any of it meant. The Thanksgiving that followed was unlike any Elena had ever experienced. Her new apartment was smaller than the penthouse, more hers, filled with books and photographs and the evidence of a life being rebuilt. Around her table sat an impossible family, Daniel and Sophia glowing, already talking about children of their own, Sophie home from her first semester at Northwestern, wearing a sweatshirt that said "engineer in training" and looking more relaxed than Elena had ever seen her.
Diana, who had become an unexpected friend over the past year, who understood things about Elena's experience that no one else could. Thomas, Diana's 12-year-old son, shy but warming up, already bonding with Daniel over a shared love of video games. Richard was not present. He had not been invited. Some boundaries were necessary for healing. But this strange, cobbled-together, impossible family, this was more than Elena had ever imagined. Someone suggested she say grace. She had never been religious, didn't know where to start. Then Sophie spoke up. "I'll do it." Everyone looked at her. She blushed slightly but didn't back down. "I'm grateful for second chances, for people who show up, for the courage it takes to build something new when everything old has fallen apart. I'm grateful for this table, and everyone at it." She paused, looked at Elena, "And I'm grateful for stepmothers, even ones you don't expect, even ones who come into your life through pain and betrayal and somehow become family anyway." Elena's eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, of something earned.
"That was beautiful. I've been practicing." Sophie grinned. "My therapist says expressing gratitude is good for mental health." "Your therapist is very wise." "She's okay." Everyone laughed. The tension broke. Food was passed. Stories were shared. For a few hours, this unlikely group of people forgot about everything that had brought them together and just enjoyed being together. Later that night, after everyone had left, Elena sat alone in her living room, looking at the photographs on her walls. New photographs. Daniel and Sophia at their engagement party, Sophie at her high school graduation, Diana and Thomas at a foundation event, a family portrait that included people who hadn't known each other 2 years ago. She thought about the woman she had been before, the billionaire's wife with the perfect life and the hidden cracks in her foundation. She thought about the woman she was now, divorced, rebuilding, somehow richer in the ways that actually mattered. And she thought about the question everyone kept asking her. How could she forgive? How could she move forward? How could she build bridges when she had every right to burn everything down? The answer was simple, even if the execution wasn't. Because burning things only creates more ash, and she was tired of living in ashes. Tell me in the comments, and if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Now, I want you to really take this in. Elena Bradford had every right to seek revenge, to destroy her husband's reputation, to take everything he had built, to turn his children against him. Instead, she did something that shocked everyone. She chose rebuilding over revenge. She chose connection over isolation. She extended grace to a woman who could have been her enemy. She became a stepmother to a daughter she never knew existed. And in doing so, she discovered something most people never learn, that the most powerful response to being wronged isn't destruction, it's transformation. Elena didn't forgive Richard completely. Some wounds leave scars, but she refused to let his failures define her future. And that's the real lesson of this story. Not that betrayal doesn't hurt, it does. Not that secrets don't damage, they do. But that we have a choice in how we respond. We can become bitter, or we can become better. We can shrink, or we can expand. We can let the worst thing that ever happened to us make us small, or we can use it as fuel for something extraordinary. Elena chose extraordinary. So can you. One more thing before we finish. There's a final chapter to this story that will leave you speechless. Part 5 is where everything comes full circle, where you'll see just how far Elena has come and what her choices have created. Don't go anywhere. The ending is going to surprise you. 2 years after finding that receipt, Elena stood in a conference room overlooking the Manhattan skyline. The Bridge Foundation had grown beyond anything she had imagined. What started as a way to process her pain had become something that changed lives. 20 scholarships awarded, 50 families supported, 100 mothers who no longer felt invisible. Sophie had just finished her sophomore year at Northwestern, top of her engineering program, already being recruited by major tech companies.
She called Elena every Sunday now, sometimes to talk about classes, sometimes about boys, sometimes just to hear a friendly voice. Last week she had called crying. "I got into the summer research program at MIT. That's amazing! Why are you crying?" "Because," Sophie's voice broke, "because I have someone to tell, someone who cares, someone who's proud of me. I am so proud of you." "I know, and that's the crazy part. I actually believe you." Daniel and Sophia were expecting their first child, a girl. They were naming her Catherine, after Richard's mother, after the woman whose eyes Sophie had inherited. When they told Sophie, she cried again. "You're naming her after our grandmother?" "Our grandmother," Daniel emphasized the word. "She's ours. You're ours. You're part of this family." Sophie had asked if she could be there when the baby was born, not as an outsider, not as the secret half-sister, as Aunt Sophie. Diana had started working at the Bridge Foundation, part-time at first, then full-time. Her experience as a single mother, her understanding of what families actually needed, made her invaluable. She and Elena had coffee every week, talked about the foundation, about their children, about how strange life was, how unpredictable. Sometimes Diana would shake her head and laugh. "If someone had told me 2 years ago that I'd be friends with Richard Bradford's ex-wife, I would have thought they were insane. If someone had told me I'd have a stepdaughter I adore and an ex-husband I can actually talk to, I would have said the same thing." Richard had changed. Not completely, not dramatically, but measurably. He had started therapy. Real therapy, not just a few sessions to say he tried. He had reached out to Sophie, carefully, respectfully, on her terms. Their relationship was still fragile, still complicated, but it existed. That was more than anyone had expected. He showed up to her engineering competition, sat in the back row, didn't approach her afterward, just sent a text. "You were brilliant today. I'm proud of you." She didn't respond for 3 days. Then, simply, "Thank you." Baby steps, but steps nonetheless. Elena had been invited to speak at a charity event, a fundraiser for organizations supporting single mothers. She stood at the podium, looking out at hundreds of faces. Some she knew, some she didn't. She began. 2 years ago, I discovered that my entire life was built on a lie. My husband of 23 years had a daughter I never knew existed, a family he had hidden from me, from everyone." The room was silent. "I had a choice in that moment. I could let that betrayal destroy me. I could seek revenge. I could burn everything down and salt the earth so nothing would ever grow there again." She paused. "Instead, I did something different. I chose to build. I reached out to the woman I should have hated and found a friend. I met the daughter I should have resented and found someone extraordinary. I took the worst thing that ever happened to me and transformed it into something that helps others." She looked around the room. "The Bridge Foundation exists because I learned something important. Pain doesn't have to make you small. Betrayal doesn't have to define you. You can take broken pieces and create something beautiful." In the back row, Sophie sat next to Diana. Both of them were crying. Beside them, Daniel held Sophia's hand. Even Richard was there, standing near the exit as if ready to leave if he wasn't welcome. Elena saw him, nodded slightly, permission to stay. "We spend so much time teaching people how to fight, how to defend themselves, how to win. But nobody teaches us how to rebuild, how to take shattered trust and create something new, how to look at someone who hurt you and choose connection over condemnation." She took a breath. "That's what the Bridge Foundation is about, not helping people win, helping them build, helping them transform pain into purpose, helping them understand that the best revenge isn't destruction, it's creation." The applause started slowly, then built. People were standing. Elena stepped away from the podium. Sophie was the first to reach her, wrapped her arms around Elena and held on tight. "Thank you," Sophie whispered. "Thank you for choosing me when you didn't have to. Thank you for letting me." Daniel hugged them both. Then Diana joined, then Sophia. A family, Not the one Elena had imagined, but a real one, built from honesty and choice and the decision to keep showing up. Richard hung back, watching, understanding that he had lost his place at the center of this circle, but Elena walked over to him. "Thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me." He looked past her at Sophie, at Daniel, at the life he almost destroyed. "I don't deserve any of this." "No, you don't, but they do, so keep showing up, keep trying, not for me, for them." "I will." "Good." She turned to walk away. He stopped her. "Elena, I need you to know something." She waited. "Losing you was the biggest mistake of my life, but watching you build this, watching you become who you are now, I'm grateful you didn't let me destroy you. I didn't do it for you." "I know, that's what makes it even more remarkable." 3 months later, Sophie called with news. "I got the summer internship at SpaceX. They want me to work on the Mars project." Elena screamed, actual screaming, happy screaming. "Sophie, that's incredible! I know, I can't believe it. Elena?" "Yes? I want you to be there when I tell my mom. I want us to tell her together." "Together?" "Yeah, like a family." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "I would love that." The celebration dinner happened that weekend. Diana cooked, Thomas set the table, Daniel and Sophia brought wine and stories about the baby. Sophie made the announcement at dinner. "I got the SpaceX internship." Diana shrieked, jumped up, hugged her daughters so tight Sophie laughed. "I can't breathe, Mom. I don't care. You're going to Mars."
Just helping build the ship, not actually going. Still, Richard had been invited this time, sat at the far end of the table, quiet, present. When Sophie looked his way, he raised his glass. "Congratulations, Sophie. You earned this." She nodded, still cautious, still careful, but softer than before. "Thanks." After dinner, Elena helped Diana with dishes. Diana turned to her, hands in soapy water. "You know what the crazy part is?" "What?" "I used to resent you before I met you. I would see pictures of you in magazines, at charity events, wearing expensive dresses. I would think she has everything, the husbands, the money, the perfect life, and I have nothing." Elena dried a plate slowly. "And now?" "Now I realized we both had nothing, just different versions of nothing. You had wealth without truth. I had truth without support. Neither of us had what we actually needed." "Which was?" "Someone who showed up, someone who chose honesty over comfort, someone who fought for us." Diana looked at her. "We gave that to each other, and to our kids." Elena set down the dish towel, hugged Diana. "Best friend I never expected." "Same." In the living room, Sophie and Daniel were showing Thomas pictures of the Mars rover. Richard watched from his chair, still separate, still finding his place. Sophie glanced over at him. "You can come look if you want." He hesitated. "I don't want to intrude." "You're already here. Might as well see why your daughter is smarter than you." He laughed, surprised. She smiled. "Baby steps." He got up, walked over, looked at the pictures on Sophie's laptop. "This is remarkable." "I know. You got your engineering mind from me, you know." Sophie looked at him. Really looked. "Maybe, but I got my resilience from my mom, and my grace from Elena. So let's call it a team effort." "Fair enough." 6 months later, Catherine was born. Daniel called Elena from the hospital at 3 in the morning. "She's here, Mom. She's perfect." "I'm on my way." Elena arrived to find Daniel pacing the hallway, Sophia asleep in the room behind him, the baby in a bassinet by the bed. "Where's Sophie?" "She's in there with the baby." Elena looked through the window. Sophie was sitting in a chair by the bassinet, one finger held gently by tiny Catherine's hand. Tears streaming down her face. "She's been there for an hour." Daniel's voice was soft. "Just watching her. Just being an aunt." Elena's heart swelled. "She's finding her place. We all are." Richard arrived an hour later. Knocked softly, Daniel let him in. He looked at Catherine, at this granddaughter who represented everything he had almost lost. She's beautiful. She is. Richard looked at his son. I'm sorry I wasn't better, for you, for Sophie, for all of it. Daniel was quiet for a moment. I know, and I'm working on forgiving you. It's hard, but I'm trying. That's all I can ask. Sophie came out of the room, saw Richard. The old tension flickered across her face, then settled. You came. Daniel's my son, Catherine's my granddaughter. Of course I came. Our granddaughter. Richard looked at her, hope flaring in his eyes. Our granddaughter. Sophie nodded. I'm not ready to call you Dad. I might never be, but I'm willing to figure out what to call you, what we are to each other. That's more than I deserve. Probably, but I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for her. She gestured toward the sleeping baby. She deserves to know all her family, not just the perfect parts. All of it. You're wise beyond your years. I had to be. You made sure of that. The words stung. They were meant to, but Richard nodded. You're right, and I'm sorry. I know. 2 years after Catherine was born, the foundation held its 5th annual gala. Elena stood on stage looking out at a ballroom full of people, donors and volunteers and families they had helped. Sophie stood beside her, now graduated from Northwestern, working at SpaceX full-time, living her dream. Diana was at their table, Thomas beside her, now a confident teenager, Daniel and Sophia with Catherine toddling between them. Even Richard was there, not at Elena's table, but present, part of the extended family in whatever shape it had taken. Elena spoke. When I started this foundation, I thought I was helping others. I didn't realize I was healing myself. She looked at Sophie. I didn't realize that the greatest gift you can give someone isn't money or opportunity. It's the simple act of showing up, of seeing them, of choosing them even when it's hard. Sophie squeezed her hand. 5 years ago, my life fell apart. My marriage ended, my trust was shattered, everything I thought I knew was a lie. She paused. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. Because it forced me to rebuild, not from someone else's blueprint, but from my own. It forced me to ask, not how do I go back to what I had, but what do I want to build instead? She gestured around the room. This is what I built. A foundation that helps families. A family that I chose and that chose me back. A life that's messy and complicated and absolutely nothing like I planned. Her voice cracked slightly. And I wouldn't change a single thing. The applause was deafening. Later at their table, Sophie raised her glass. To Elena, for showing up when nobody would have blamed you for walking away, for choosing love over logic, for teaching me that family isn't about blood, it's about who stays. Everyone drank. Elena looked around the table, at faces that had been strangers, that had become her world. Diana caught her eye, mouthed, "Thank you." Daniel smiled at her, the same smile he had as a little boy, before everything got complicated. Even Richard at his separate table raised his glass slightly. Acknowledgement, gratitude. But it was Sophie's face that made Elena's heart full. Sophie, who had spent 17 years feeling unwanted, who built walls so high nobody could climb them. Sophie, who was smiling now, really smiling, who had let herself be loved. That night, alone in her apartment, Elena looked at her phone. A text from Sophie. I love you. I know I don't say it enough, but I do. Thank you for choosing me. Elena typed back through tears. Thank you for letting me. I love you too. She set down the phone, looked around at her life. It wasn't the life she planned. It was smaller in some ways, bigger in others. It didn't have the penthouse or the perfect marriage or the fairy tale ending, but it had truth and connection and people who showed up. It had Sophie calling every Sunday, Daniel bringing Catherine for dinner every week, Diana texting her funny memes, a foundation that changed lives, a family built from broken pieces. It had love, real love, the kind that survived the worst and came out stronger. And that, Elena realized, was everything. So, here's what I want you to take from Elena's story. She didn't get revenge. She built bridges. She didn't seek destruction. She created transformation. She didn't let the worst thing that happened to her become the only thing that mattered. She chose every single day to build something new. And if she can do it, so can you. Whatever betrayal you're facing, whatever pain you're carrying, whatever seems impossible to overcome, you have a choice. You can burn it all down, or you can build something beautiful from the ashes. Choose building, choose growth, choose grace. Not because the people who hurt you deserve it, but because you deserve better than a life defined by their failures. You deserve extraordinary. So, go build it. If this story touched you, if you saw yourself in Elena or Sophie or Diana, I need you to do something. Hit that subscribe button right now, because every week we're here telling stories about women who refuse to stay broken, about families that heal, about the kind of love that transforms everything it touches. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that healing is possible, that betrayal doesn't have to be the end, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is choose grace over rage. And drop a comment telling me your story. Tell me about a time you chose building over burning. Tell me about the bridges you made instead of the ones you destroyed. Your story matters. Your voice matters. And somewhere out there, someone needs to hear that they're not alone. This is the end of Elena's story, but it's just the beginning of yours. Welcome to the family. Now, go build something extraordinary.